This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and the Israeli Prime Minister Olmert met in Jerusalem after Israeli and Palestinian negotiators failed to achieve any progress in yesterday's meeting.
The meeting comes as Bush arrives to Israel, which will be his first stop on his trip to the Middle East, which aims at reviving the stalled peace process.
Before meeting Abbas, Olmert said that Bush's visit is extremely important. Olmert also said during his weekly meeting with members of the Qadim party that Bush's trip will most likely be productive. Meanwhile, 200 Israelis held a demonstration in Jerusalem demanding the release of Jonathan Pollard, who is serving a prison sentence in the U.S. for spying for Israel. Strict security measures were taken in Jerusalem and Ramallah.
في كل من القدس ورام الله.
على مقربة من ضريح الزعيم الفلسطيني الراحل ياسر عرفات تحط مروحية أمريكية.
Near the grave of the late President Yasser Arafat, an American helicopter landed with security personnel who came to inspect the area. This will be one of the stops that the American President George Bush will make in his trip to the Middle East. Most likely, he will not greet the deceased Arafat, who died before achieving the Palestinian dream of an independent state. Instead, he will reiterate in front of his hosts inside the Muqata'a in Ramallah what has already been said about the establishment of a Palestinian and Israeli states that live side by side in peace.
وإذ تضيق بهؤلاء أي المضيفين الفلسطينيين دهاليز التسوية السياسية السلمية.
Palestinian officials are trying to do their best during their talks with the Israelis, even during the last 15 minutes before Bush's arrival, to make sure that his mission succeeds. They continue the peace negotiations which have led to nothing since the Annapolis conference. Palestinian efforts also include Abbas's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Olmert and, of course, the press statement in which the spokesman of the Palestinian president expressed hope that a peace agreement can be reached during this year to end the occupation. However, a great majority of the Palestinians do not believe in such hopes.
غير قابلة للتصديق في نظر غالبية كبيرة من الفلسطينيين.
If Bush wanted to do something for the Palestinians, he would have done it in the beginning of his term. He comes now because he's weak and about to leave office. They are trying to fool us.
According to a poll survey conducted by the Palestinian Center for Research, 70% of the Palestinians are positive that the negotiations with Israel will fail. Only 23% are optimistic that the negotiations will succeed. The Palestinian frustration and pessimism stem from the daily death that has been imposed on them by the Israeli war machine, especially in Gaza, which was considered by Olmert's government as a hostile entity after it was controlled by Hamas.
I want to remind you that a war has been going on in Gaza for several months to destroy the infrastructure of terrorist groups like the Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Without a doubt, they have to continue working to stop the launching of missiles.
However, some people point out that another Israeli war was also launched in the West Bank, where no Qassam missiles are launched. In fact, the West Bank is controlled by Fatah officials who have been pleading for peace with Israel and have been meeting with Olmert and his government despite all the Israeli attacks and settlement activities.
top story. 2 Katyusha rockets were fired at the western Galilee town of Shlomi on the northern border overnight. No one was injured in the attack. Defense Minister Ehud Barak termed the rocket attack grave, but said that Jerusalem would not make any changes to the status quo in the north as a response. Police said that one of the rockets was a 107-millimeter Katyusha with a 20-kilometer range. Army radio reported that the rockets, which were fired from Lebanon, lightly damaged a house and an electricity pole. Gabi Naaman, head of the Shlomi local council, said residents thought the rocket attack was thunder and only realized this morning that terrorists had fired on their community. No organization has claimed responsibility for the incident. In Beirut, Hezbollah declined comment. UNIFIL, that has troops deployed along the border, said it was investigating the incident.
IDF forces traded fire with Hamas terrorists along the Gaza coast today. During the exchange, Hamas gunmen fired at Israeli naval boats. In response, an IAF helicopter fired 2 missiles at the Hamas forces. The IDF said it was acting against weapons smuggling from Egypt. According to reports, one of the Israeli missiles missed its target and landed inside Egyptian territory.
In less than 20 hours from now, President George Bush will land at Ben Gurion Airport, beginning his first visit to Israel as President of the United States, as part of a last-ditch effort to show some progress in peace talks. Ahead of the Bush visit, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert met in Jerusalem this afternoon with PA President Mahmoud Abbas. That meeting ended a short time ago, and bringing us up to date with the details is IBA's diplomatic correspondent, Leah Zinder. Leah?
Yes, Laura, the countdown has indeed begun to all the pomp and splendor of the first presidential visit by George W. Bush to Israel tomorrow. But excruciating decisions remain to be made, and that was very much on the mind of Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and PA President Mahmoud Abbas as they met early this afternoon at the Prime Minister's residence. For the first hour, the 2 leaders met together with their negotiating teams, and the second hour was spent privately one-on-one. The bottom line of the meeting this afternoon: both Olmert and Abbas have authorized Tzipi Livni and Ahmed Korea, their chief negotiators, to begin discussions on all of the core issues on the table without delay. All the core issues. To remind you, that means the issue of the borders, of the refugees, and, most painful of all, the issue of Jerusalem. And it'll be interesting to hear what Avigdor Lieberman has to say about that. We remember that he threatened to resign from the government as soon as those discussions begin. Prime Minister Olmert raised the subject with the Palestinians of the fledgling rocket production that was discovered in Nablus in an IDF operation there. He said that this was a Palestinian problem, not just an Israeli problem. The Palestinians, for their part, raised the issues of these settlements, demanding a total freeze on all settlement activity. And Prime Minister Olmert said that he would give his own personal approval to any, even small construction in any of the settlements. He said Israel sees Jerusalem not as part of the West Bank, but nevertheless, he said, he is aware of the sensitivities on this issue. Now, the Palestinians, as we say, are making a big fuss about the settlement issue. Prime Minister Olmert, for his part, has promised that he will give President Bush in his talks tomorrow and yet another Israeli commitment that the unauthorized Israeli settlements will be removed. A spokesman for the Prime Minister said Israel is deeply serious about this issue. So as we await President Bush's landing here tomorrow, what we can say is the dialogue with the Palestinians is intensifying today, a welcome gift, if you like, to President George W. Bush. Back to you in the studio.
Leah Zinder, our diplomatic correspondent from Tel Aviv, thank you. Well, as Leah mentioned, it's down to the final hours of preparations for the visit of President Bush. The capital is in the midst of its largest security operation since the Pope visited in the year 2000. Many city streets will be closed off for the visit, but police are hoping the traffic in Jerusalem will not come to a total standstill. IBA's Eli Wogelanter has more in this report.
Jerusalem is already adorned with thousands of pennants and flags with the American stars and stripes as the city braces for the visit of President Bush. Pretty much all of the 7,000 hotel rooms in the capital are booked. Bush and his entourage, as well as 120 journalists, have completely taken over a couple of hotels, as well as rooms throughout the city. At the center of it all is the King David Hotel, with all 237 rooms taken up by Bush's entourage. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and U.S. Ambassador Richard Jones will also be staying at the King David, and the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv will move to the capital almost in its entirety.
This hotel, basically for 3 days, starting from the night of the 8th through to the 11th, is going to be a small White House with a bit of a State Department as well.
Security, needless to say, is very tight, with concern that Bush could be targeted, as Al-Qaeda urged in this video appeal to terrorists in the region. Secret Service agents, technicians, and even Marines have already arrived to prepare for the visit and secure the surrounding area. Security robots have even been positioned in city sewers to make sure there are no surprises underground. Analysts say the greatest risk may come from an individual suddenly inspired to take violent action.
We are talking about a crazy man, crazy Palestinian, or somebody who was sent here not by Hamas or by I don't know what. Perhaps that he went to the mosque and he heard something and he will do something. That's the only risk I think that he had.
Israel also fears attempts by right-wing Jewish activists to sabotage the visit in protest over the Olmert government's policy of curbing West Bank settlement activity. Last night, police in the capital arrested at least 6 youths for hanging these posters criticizing Bush and Olmert. Ironically, protesters in Gaza carried similar posters criticizing Olmert and Bush. Demonstrations are also expected in the city during the president's visit, similar to yesterday's protest over the release of convicted spy Jonathan Pollard. One thing all residents of the capital fear is the nightmare traffic expected over the next 3 days. Indeed, it was announced today that due to security considerations, Bush will not fly from the airport, but will be driven to Jerusalem, which means that Route 1 will be closed in the direction of the capital tomorrow from 12 p.m. to 12:45. But police say they are making every effort to keep things running as smoothly as possible.
We're working together with the municipality and other organizations to make life continue throughout the visit as much as possible. It might be inconvenient, but we're hoping that the public will understand that the security measures that we're taking are vital for this important visit.
The security operation, dubbed Clear Skies, will cost Israel $25,000 for every hour Bush is in the country, or about $1.2 million for the 48 hours he's here. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
Bush's visit to the Middle East comes amidst deterioration in the region. This news comes after the latest showdown between the U.S. and Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. The incident, which took place last Saturday, was reported yesterday. According to the U.S. Defense Department, Iranian boats encountered U.S. Navy ships in the Strait of Hormuz and issued warnings via radio transmission devices. The Pentagon added that a U.S. naval captain was about to give an order to fire at the Iranian boats when the Iranians abruptly turned away. Meanwhile, Iran confirmed but downplayed the incident. In another development, the U.S. Marines confirmed that 2 F-18 fighter planes from the aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman crashed in the Gulf after a mid-air collision, but all 3 pilots were in good condition. The Israeli apartheid wall and settlements remain one of the main obstacles to peace negotiations with the Palestinians. The Palestinian town of Hizma has been isolated from neighboring Jerusalem by settlements and the apartheid wall, which altered the look and identity of Arab neighborhoods in and around the old city. Sharouk Assad reports from occupied Jerusalem.
Hizma is a Palestinian town located on the outskirts of occupied Jerusalem. This is what the residents are saying about the living conditions in the town. Hizma is surrounded by 5 Israeli settlements, which were built on confiscated Palestinian land. The apartheid wall, which is surrounding Hizma from the east and west, was built in a way that brought Israeli settlements inside the boundary of Jerusalem and kept Hizma to the outside.
Nearly 4,300 of Hizma's 16,000 dunams have been confiscated. Before Israel built these settlements and the apartheid wall, the residents were able to leave town and look for work. However, the unemployment rate is now soaring. The current unemployment rate stands at 92%.
We are surrounded by 4 settlements, including the Nevi Yaqub and the so-called Bisgav Ziv, which is a home to the more than 70,000 Israeli settlers. In addition, the settlement of Anatot and Adam are surrounding Hizma from the east and the north. Furthermore, Israel has built a new settlement post in the area of Qurba.
Parts of the settlements were built on Hizma's land, where the settlers are allowed to expand, build and plan for future developments. In contrast, the residents of Hizma are not allowed to build or expand their homes. Just like this home, many of the newly developed homes in Hizma have been demolished by the Israeli Authority.
I spent all I have to build this home. I wanted to provide a comfortable life for my family. Unfortunately, they demolished it. My message to the Palestinian negotiators: before going to the bargaining table, stop and see to yourself what is going on here.
This is their message, and this is their present, which Israel is seeking to make their future as well. Sherouk Assad, Dubai TV, Hizma, occupied Jerusalem.
Parliament Speaker Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel says the upcoming visit of U.S. President George W. Bush to the Persian Gulf region is aimed at sowing seeds of discord among Iran and its neighbors. Facing reporters, Haddad Adel said the U.S. president should be assured that he cannot isolate Iran. The top parliamentarian said the reason behind Iran's regional influence is not its wealth, power, or policy. Rather, the country's justice-seeking drive and righteousness, inspired by Islamic teachings. He underlined since the U.S. backs the Zionist regime's crimes in the case of Palestinians, the visit of the U.S. president to the region will bear no fruit. On recent hues and cries raised by the U.S. regarding confrontation of the U.S. warships and Iranian speedboats, he said it is Iran that should claim interference of aliens in the region. He underscored that the Americans, who are thousands of kilometers away from the Persian Gulf region, have brought their warships there for many years.
In Gaza, electrical outages went up from 4 hours to more than 8 hours daily. Some areas are under complete electrical outages. This coincides with the period of final exams and the continuous Israeli attacks against the Palestinian people.
عام 2008 عاد فيه الفلسطينيون إلى الشموع مرة أخرى.
It is 2008, but the people of Gaza are back to living by candlelight. The problem of electrical outages in Gaza started with the beginning of winter, but the blackouts have since then multiplied, exceeding 8 hours a day. Sometimes the electricity stays out all through the night. The Palestinian Energy Municipality said that these outages are due to Israel's reduction of fuel supply into Gaza. The fuel is no longer sufficient to run the electrical generators, so the citizens of Gaza are using old stoves to warm their cold nights.
It's been shut off all day, since 6 a.m. and it's now 7 at night. We just use candles, coal and fire. What else can we do? It always gets cut off in our area, the eastern area, because we're always getting raided. With the electrical outages, the children just keep screaming and they can't sleep. The suffering we go through is unprecedented.
Continuous Israeli raids and attacks on Gaza terrify the children, and the electrical outages only deepen their terror. Moreover, the food that families store in case of raids is susceptible to being spoiled.
All of the electrical equipment stops working, and all of the stored food goes bad.
No electricity, raids, and the sound of gunshots, all this terrifies the children and makes them tremble. It weakens their hearts.
These electrical outages also coincide with the beginning of the final exam period for Palestinian schools. And studying by candlelight is difficult for many children.
We don't have electricity and I can't study at all. I have an exam tomorrow, but I can't study for it because of the electricity.
We can't read anything. It's cold and rainy outside, and we can't use a heater because there is no electricity.
The new year brought darkness and destruction to the Palestinian people. And while the sky over Gaza is lit by Israeli rockets, the homes in Gaza are lit by candles.
ونعود أيضا في نفس الموضوع وفي إطار محاولاتها لتوسيع المستوطنات.
In an attempt to expand its settlements, Israel is seeking to eradicate all aspects of Bedouin life in the Negev desert and the Jordan Valley. The Israeli campaign aims at mounting further pressure on the Bedouins in the region.
حياة البدو الفلسطينيين في مهب رياح إسرائيلية عاصفة.
The life of Palestinian Bedouins is being impacted by a stormy Israeli campaign. Israel has worked vigorously to remove the Bedouins from the Palestinian map and drive them out of the Negev desert. This comes despite the fact that the Bedouins are living in less than 2% of the total area of the Negev. The area where the Bedouins are living is often referred to as an area under siege. The area is surrounded from all directions by Jewish settlements. Much of the land confiscated by Israel has been used to build military bases, industrial areas, and natural conservatories. In addition, each Bedouin town is further isolated and surrounded by Israeli settlements and farms. There appears to be a reason for this anti-Bedouin campaign. The Israeli government is seeking to take control over the land and its people. Israel expressed fear over the Bedouins' high rate of birth, which is among the highest in the world. In addition, it's rather hard to monitor the nomadic life of Bedouins, especially since many are nomadic who often travel from one place to another. For centuries, many of the Bedouin families have used grazing areas between Jerusalem and the Jordan River Valley. However, this nomadic way of life is now facing endangerment. Hundreds of Bedouin families are facing hard living and financial conditions as many started to buy food for their sheep and goats instead of searching for it.
This year will be disastrous for all those who breed and herd animals, especially if we have a bad grazing season next spring. The Bedouins need support.
The
Bedouin families expressed pessimism, especially considering that many of them are living in shacks without electricity and running water. In addition, many of these Bedouin families depend on the support of non-government organizations operating in the West Bank. Khalid Al-Qashif, Al-Arabiya.
Three UN troops have been hurt in a roadside bomb in southern Lebanon. It happened about 30 kilometers from Beirut. It's understood the soldiers weren't on patrol when the explosion happened. Let's get more information to Rumili and speak to Zaina Hodder. Zaina, bring us up to date with what you know.
Well, what we know is that a UN vehicle came under attack on this coastal highway, which connects Beirut to South Lebanon. This is a main supply route that the UN forces use. So on a daily basis, you will see UN vehicles drive to Beirut and to southern Lebanon. This particular vehicle was heading to South Lebanon. As you mentioned, 2 Irish peacekeepers belonging to the Irish battalion were lightly injured in the attack. Now, if you can see the billboard behind me, apparently this is what the reports we're having on here on the ground, was that a bomb was placed on the side of the road behind, right next to that billboard, and detonated by remote control while the vehicle passed. Now, this is not the first time UN peacekeeping forces come under attack in Lebanon. Last June, they came under attack, the Spanish contingent. 6 Spanish soldiers were killed in a car explosion, but that took place within the area of operations, within the UN forces area of operations in southern Lebanon. This is not their area of operations. Their area of operations is further south. Now, the latest attack, today's attack, comes just weeks after we heard a threat by Osama bin Laden, the Al-Qaeda leader, in his audio tape message. He said, and he called the UN forces crusader troops, and he even accused them of being deployed here to protect the Jews. So, and it wasn't really the first threat against the UN force, but it was the latest one.
And this type of device, Zaina, is similar to devices used, of course, in Baghdad.
Well, it's very difficult for us to confirm that at this point. If you can see behind me, the Lebanese army immediately sealed off the area and have begun investigating, trying to sift through the wreckage to find any clues, any evidence. In fact, the UN peacekeeping force said that they launched an official investigation, an immediate investigation, and they're closely coordinating with the Lebanese army. So it's still too early for us to say what kind of an explosion and who was responsible. But like I mentioned, the UN force has been singled out by Qaeda and other extremist groups, if you like, linked to Al-Qaeda over the past year. Now, we spoke to the UN spokesman who was here a short while ago, and he said this will not deter our activities. This was a message to the UN force that they want to destabilize southern Lebanon. They do not want to see peace and calm along the Lebanon-Israel border, but this will no way deter their duties. They will continue to carry out their duties. But I must mention that after the attack last June, when 6 soldiers were killed, the United Nations force stepped up a lot of security measures. It started to take extra tighter security precautions, but it's very difficult. They cannot eliminate the risks totally, because if they stay in their compounds, it would really undermine their mission. And their mission here in Lebanon is to patrol the villages and to ensure that the area along the border with Israel is free of any weapons.
The Iraqi High Criminal Court resumed deliberations in Baghdad in the trial of the 1991 Sha'ban uprising.
The court listened today to more witnesses who testified against 15 defendants from the former regime.
Presided by Judge Muhammad Al-Iraqiya, the High Criminal Court held today another session in the trial of the former figures of the Iraqi regime, which took part in the suppression of the Sha'ban uprising in southern Iraq. In a session that was open to the public, the court listened to more witnesses testifying against 15 figures from the former Iraqi regime.
The defendants and their lawyers are present. This session is open to the public. Call the first witness.
The former regime tried to break the will of the Iraqi people, especially in the south. They attempted to marginalize the south and kept it away from the center of attention, influence, and power. This oppressive policy of the former regime has caused irreparable harm to all segments of the Iraqi society.
In a session that was open to the public, the court listened to more witnesses who talked about their ordeal during the Sha'ban uprising in southern Iraq, where many Iraqis were killed and many others were displaced.
After returning to the area of Jazeera, we assessed the damage.
Pardon me. Please take notice that the witness has lived near the area of Jazeera during 1984. After you were displaced, where did you go?
We moved to the Amara province. We lived there for nearly 6 years. Then we moved back to the area of Jazeera in December 1989. Upon returning, we found out that the army has wreaked havoc in the town. They destroyed our homes and flooded the crops. They destroyed everything there.
The final decision remains in the court's hand, which many hope it will bring justice to those who were unjustly treated and help heal the nation and restore its dignity. Sadiq Al-Shimali, Iraqiya, Baghdad.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.